Yes, folks, the noose is slowly tightening around the necks of Rugby Australia's Raelene Castle and Qantas's Alan Joyce. Mark Latham has written evidence that Qantas fired Israel Folau. Have a look at this.
Israel Folau's legal team confirmed that applications had been filed in the Fair Work Commission against both Rugby Australia and the Waratahs, with Mr Folau seeking a declaration that his employment had been unlawfully terminated. Mr Folau was sacked by Rugby Australia after an Instagram post in which he said homosexuals, among others, would go to hell if they did not repent. In a statement, Mr Folau said, "The messages of support we have received over these difficult few weeks have made me realise there are many Australians who feel their fundamental rights are being steadily eroded. No Australian of any faith should be fired for practising their religion." Mr Folau is seeking substantial remedies from his former employers, given, he says, his termination prevented him from playing at the peak of his career and on the cusp of a Rugby World Cup. The news comes as New South Wales One Nation leader Mark Latham used parliamentary privilege to accuse Qantas of being behind the sacking of the rugby player. Mr Latham revealed that in written evidence from Rugby Australia Chief Executive Raelene Castle to Mr Folau's Code of Conduct hearing, Ms Castle said she twice contacted Qantas Chief Customer Officer Vanessa Hudson to give her information before it was made public. On April 11th, she called Ms Hudson and told her she could tell Qantas boss Alan Joyce that Rugby Australia were working towards firing Mr Folau.
And that, folks, is about a month before the three-member panel made their recommendations following Folau's so-called Code of Conduct hearing.
She said Ms Hudson texted me later that day saying that she had only shared the update with Mr Joyce and he was appreciative of the transparency, and he said that a speedy resolution by Rugby Australia was paramount.
The evidence I've read out, the material presented by Raelene Castle, shows beyond doubt that Israel Folau was sacked by Qantas. Sporting codes have now been purchased, holus bolus, by big companies. Big capital is owning these sporting codes.
Sky News has contacted Qantas, which declined to make further comment, but pointed us towards a statement that Mr Joyce had made last month, in which he said the airline didn't sponsor something to get involved in controversy, that it expected its partners to take appropriate action.
Folks, this clip gives a little bit more info regarding the money side of it.
Israel Folau is seeking more than $10 million in damages from Rugby Australia. He's filed a claim with Australia's Fair Work Commission over what he believes was his unlawful dismissal. The 30-year-old had his multi-million-dollar contract torn up last month over a social media post in which he said homosexuals would go to hell if they did not repent. His lawyers say it was unlawful to terminate his contract on the basis of religion. If successful in the full claim, it could bankrupt Rugby Australia.
And that's exactly what I want to hear. It could bankrupt Rugby Australia. And now, folks, other politicians are getting involved.
Conservative coalition MPs are pushing the Morrison government for more radical and far-reaching religious freedom provisions. Let's go to Christy Kulcher, joins us live now. Christy, of course, this comes in the context of the Israel Folau case.
That's right, Kieran. These particular MPs who are pushing for the change in forthcoming laws have dubbed it Folau's Law. Former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce says that Rugby Australia's sacking of Israel Folau over his controversial religious post that he made to social media has left many people feeling awkward and uneasy. He's now calling for laws to exempt religious beliefs from employment contracts, essentially giving anyone who shares their religious views legal protection.
Yeah, folks, I'm not quite sure about this one because this also applies to Islam, and that could be very dangerous indeed.
Mr Joyce says you can't bring people's faith beliefs into a contract. Your own views on who God is, where God is, and whether there is a God should remain your own personal views and not part of any contractual obligation. Though it's been inspired by the sacking of Israel Folau, Mr Joyce says that it shouldn't be nicknamed Folau's Law, as the law would be made for everybody. He does have the backing of Attorney General Christian Porter, who's expected to present a Religious Discrimination Act to Parliament as soon as July.
Yeah, folks, I'm really not comfortable with putting more laws on top of existing laws. I'd prefer to remove laws. I'd prefer to have free speech go back to any speech that doesn't incite violence.